call the meeting to order. Mac, will you do a prayer and fail, please?
Let's pray. Our Father and our God, we thank you so much for your blessings. Thank you for this time that we can come together and discuss the business of the city of East Ridge. Thank you for allowing us to live in a great country like America and a great state like Tennessee, a great city like East Ridge. Bless this meeting tonight now and pray that everything that we do and say will be fair and equitable. Forgive us of our sins. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a roll call, please. Chairman Brawley. Here. Vice Chairman Steele. Here. Mr. Baker.
Here.
Mr. City.
Here. Mr.
Cox.
Here.
Mr. Penley.
Here.
Mr. Torek.
Here.
Okay. Has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes of the last meeting that was in May, a while back? If so, I will entertain a motion.
I make a motion.
I second.
To accept it.
Okay. All in favor? Say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, next one is old business. There is none, and we have 3 items on the new business. First is discuss and take action on the development agreement with Seth R. Champion, Better Mass Champions. Mark?
All right, I'll have to kind of explain this to you. Mandy Veazey is here. All right, Mandy Veazey is the representative. Seth Champion is actually out of the country and is flying back and may land here shortly. I've talked to him several times on this and spoken with him, but he certainly wanted to express his appreciation for the board. But when we rescheduled and had this meeting, he had already had something planned, so he couldn't come. But Mandy has been with them. She's one of their general managers. She's been around for a little, close to 6 years. Champions is an organization that started in 2009-ish, 2010. They've been in existence for just under 10 years. There are 8 restaurants in and around the southeast, consisting in Atlanta or in Athens. They got one in Huntsville. They've got one in Murfreesboro. They've got a couple down in Mississippi, and then they have 2 here. And now this would add a 9th restaurant that they want to have. And so when Seth came to me and said, "Mark, we want to put in a one on East Ridge," he provided to us a projected cost. And as I go through these, I may ask Mandy. I've talked to Mandy and asked her, and she verified kind of the expenses that were provided to us, and they should be in the spreadsheet that you all got electronically, and they're also in your packet here. This Champies is going to be the largest Champies of the 9 restaurants. It'll be approximately 1.5 times bigger than the Lee Highway, Shallowford Road. He's also incorporating a new concept in his, if you've been there, you know his model is good chicken done fairly fast. And what he wants to do is he has found that the model for restaurants is kind of twofold, really threefold. You've got your fast food restaurants. There's an expectation of quality with fast food. They have a sit-down restaurant portion. There's an expectation of quality for that. And then the middle area, he says that the movement now for demand in the restaurant business is food done fast but at a sit-down quality. And so he's going to put in 2 lines for the restaurant. He'll have his restaurant food line where everything is prepared for the restaurant people. He's going to have another food line and have it to where there's a pull-up, a window and drive-through where people can order. And he said within 8 to 12 minutes they'll have their food to be able to take home that's of restaurant quality, but they can take it home. He is finding that the studies show the generations are, the younger generation doesn't necessarily like to eat at restaurants, but they want to pick up food. And he wants to fill that void. And so he's going to, this is the first restaurant he'll have where there are 2 food lines preparing chicken. So basically, the kitchen's going to be about 1.5 times the size of anything else he's got. So I said, all right, Seth, that's wonderful. What we need for you to do is provide us projected sales as well as what your startup costs are. And so what he's provided, and in your packet, I think it's going to be on the last page, and I'm looking at the spreadsheet here. Seth broke it down for us, and he's got one-time expenses and he's got recurring expenses. He recognizes that the investment period is for another 7 years, still through 2027, but he also recognizes that the purpose of the Board of Regents is for the development of the startup cost, but that this board has the ability to structure how it wants to the incentive package. So he went ahead and he split these up, and in talking with the city manager and finance director and looking at the cost of what it would be to start up, and you come up with essentially about a $5.5 million figure. That consists of, on the lines there, property purchase, demolition, removal of the grease trap, construction of the new property, landscape, purchase of kitchen equipment, electronics and furniture, and the interest in the loan. All of those are under the Board of Regents what are the intended eligible reimbursable expenses. And so when you take and add those up, you get about a $5.5 million figure. Maybe just a little higher, maybe 5.55 or something. And so I took that and I went over to their projected annual revenue. So go back a page with me. And on their projected annual revenue, Seth provided to me what he thinks his annual sales are going to be. Mandy, they're going to expect to open around May.
That's what I'm shooting for you.
All right, so they're shooting for a May opening, and you see there that about a $3.2 million will be what they clear, or what their sales tax, what their taxable sales will be in 2020 will be $3.25 million. After that, you can see their projections, and he's done it on about a 3% growth annually. And I took the numbers that Seth provided, and I did a 5-year, 10-year, 15-year, and 22-year assessment, and just took the average. And so in year 5, in other words, over the course of 5 years, the anticipated sales, if you took years 2020 to 2024, you're going to have approximately $5.745 million in average sales. And then I did it for 10 years, 15 and 20. And I did that to try to give you all at least an illustration of what the anticipated sales are going to be, so that when you run the full spreadsheet, which turns to the front page, we can now identify what some rough projected estimated revenue will be generated in connection with this development, both from a city standpoint and from a developer standpoint. So you take on the front page here the property taxes, which is property that for taxes generated by the city. It's not under the Board of Regents. I took his. We know he paid $1.5 million for the property. Prior to Seth buying it, it was an appraised value of $827,000. The city was generating rough numbers, $4,400 a year was all the city was generating. If Seth didn't do anything to it today, we know he paid 1.5, so it would get assessed at that amount, or 40% of that amount. We know that it would bring in $8,000 annually if no building at all was put up there. Roll that down on year 10, just multiply it by 10, the city would receive over $80,000 a year. Over 22 years, the city would receive $176,000 if he never improved the property ever. We projected that the total appraised value once he does the build out is going to be between $3 and $3.5 million. So I just did a 3.5 figure in there. And at the current taxable property rate, you can see there that in year 1 it's going to generate we'll say $19,000 for easy math, around $19,000. Over 22 years, it's going to generate $412,000. So circle that 412, and we'll kind of come back to that number there. And that's money that the city would get if he builds the building and there was no Board of Regents dollars at all. So you can see what the increase is going to be compared to if he doesn't do anything. The city gets 176. If he builds it, it's 412. So you're looking at somewhere around, you know, $240,000 increase right there. All right. Local option. That's another tax that is nowhere, has nothing to do with the Board of Region. And I've done the same thing. Now, I took out the school calculator fund, so it's a multiple of 1.125. And I use, as you see there in that column, average annual sales. That is the numbers that I took. If you look back on what I did with this spreadsheet, I took the average annual sales that he provided, and I plugged those in. So in other words, so for year one, he said his annual sales for year one was going to be $3.25 million. If his sales are $3.25 million, then the city's going to generate $36,500 in the local option. And again, that is the number that I've already backed out the school fund for. And on that right column there, under the local option sales tax, over 22 years, assuming CES numbers are the average of what he says, the city can anticipate generating over 22 years $2.1 million in sales. No, local option sales, excuse me. All right, and that's money that would come irrespective of whether or not the Board of Region existed. All right. So the last numbers, or the last group there, is the Board of Region sales tax. And same concept here. When you break down the calculation for the Board of Region, it comes out to about 4.125 per dollar. And so I can easily take the math and do, based upon his average sales, we know that in year one, again, if it's 3.25 million that he sells in, or generates in sales, then the city, under the Board of Region, would generate $134,000. And that's the Board of Region one there. And then, of course, over the 22-year period, because again, it sunsets in 2042, and he starts in 2020. So I did this over a 22-year period. He's going to generate around $7.8 million, $7.845 million in Board of Region sales over a 22-year period. And again, I've already backed out the education fund, and so that is what would come to the city in connection with the Board of Region tax certification. All right, so just to recap, I'm just using right now the big numbers on the year 22. You're going to get $412,000 in property taxes. You're going to get $2.1 million in local sales, and then there's a $7.845 million in Board of Region. How do you all want to distribute that? So you look over the next page, and I've just prepared a series of spreadsheets so that you all can see the numbers on how it would be distributed. All right. And in looking at this, there's a number I see that I need to fix here, but essentially, when you look at the numbers, what the city manager, and looking at it and talking with them and looking at what the city is receiving in the overall Board of Region and what is going out to the payment of either developers or to the general fund, a 30-70 split makes at least allows the city to generate under a 30-70 split over 22 years. It's going to be $4.9 million is what the city would receive in its payment. The developer would get right at 5.5, and so for his hard costs, he's going to get paid back the incentive, or he get paid back all of his development costs over the 22-year period, provided, of course, he sells at the rate of what he represented in connection with the sales. But that 4.9 is a number that, in talking with the city manager, and he's run his numbers on what the city has committed, because the city has bonds out there as well, and what the city is receiving in Board of Region and what it's allocating out. The city would receive this, but all of this actually, if received, will be accounted for based upon the bonds that it has, the general fund that it's doing, the additional infrastructure that it's putting in. The city is doing the multimodal. This will help assist in connection with the multimodal. There's more cost in multimodal, but this helps for the city to complete or at least continue that multimodal project as well as the increase in resources that are needed for the growth of the city. And so city manager has run these numbers and to see this is what the city would need, that 4 point. That doesn't make us whole. We still are lacking in funds. But that gets us there, at least to help. And then the developer would get his payment back for his cost over the 22-year period. And that's our spreadsheet. And so in talking with the developer, he is fine with that. He had said he did want a higher percentage, but as I talked to him today, and Mandy was with us, we talked to him, he said he understands and he appreciates and would do the 30-70 split is what he's so that's been the recommended amount of the split coming from the city administration.
Anybody have any questions?
I have one question. Will the appearance of the shanties in these streets look anything like the one on Brainerd Road?
The Willie Highway one.
I mean Lee Highway.
It'll be similar. Is that fair to say?
Similar,
Okay.
yeah.
They all look alike.
Okay.
If we're still want to have the same feel,
Mhm.
but it'll be a little different. This patio and everything will be a lot bigger.
What's 2 patios, doesn't it?
No, I think we just did one.
Just one?
And then
Okay.
garage doors on the other side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have pictures of it. It's kind of hard to explain, but yeah, it'll be similar. We still want that eclectic feel, that Mississippi Delta vibe on the outside.
It'll look like it's built out of used material. I don't like it myself. I think if you're gonna spend that kind of money and build a new building, it ought to look like a new building.
That's patina, that's patina, man.
This store is going to be the biggest and coolest store that we've done.
We're talking about millennials here.
Younger generation.
I had them on my phone. I didn't know
Oh,
that,
they
but I
don't
can
want
show
no
it to you.
material.
Let me.
Steel and
Have you seen something?
I can pass one out, or at least put on the computer here. Let me find it. I have a sketching of it, but it's not a. Let me find it here.
I thought they'd be buying the old barn down on Parley. Using it.
I think they've already bought it and it's on Lee Highway. Sorry, but that's just the way I feel.
Okay, it's okay.
One thing, where's Ken? Ken,
I sent you the PDF.
yeah, I know. Do you want to tell them kind of what the new, with the setbacks and how that's going to impact and have a better appeal, curb appeal?
Yeah, so essentially we'll take it through the planning commission and then also city council. This will be a little bit different concept than what you see on Ringo Road as a whole. We actually have a 5-foot setback from the edge of the state right of way now instead of 25, so it'll actually be built a little bit closer to the road. And the way that it'll orientate on the lot will provide more kind of a focal point back towards the interstate. And the actual concept itself, I think it has like a water tower look over the front.
Here, this is, yeah. Passes.
Got the same large open air seating.
Buttons on there.
It should.
All right, Mark, were we able to see any comparable sales figures for some of the other larger champions?
I have talked to him about these. These have higher sales. He expects it to be a higher volume for 2 reasons. One, it's a bigger store, and he's going to have the 2 serving lines going through. The store down on MLK runs about 85% of what he's projecting on this one. The one downtown has a lot of traffic, but it's a smaller building. And
What
so-
about the parking? How many spaces are you all having, parking spaces?
That is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
They don't have to have a variance. I know that.
It'll flip in just a second.
I don't recall what the number is, but it's already been through site review.
So if the sales weren't met, say if they hit 75%, how does that affect the city of East Ridge?
Well, it affects us from a collection on the border region and the local option, but there's nothing promised to him. The city is not promising a bottom or a ceiling amount or a minimum amount. As the numbers are played out, based upon what he provided from an average standpoint, this is what he can project to get. But by no means is the city promised this 5.4 or 5.5 million. This was just on his sales projections. If he doesn't open, he doesn't get it done. I mean, if he didn't open at all, then at a minimum the city's going to receive, $18,000 annually, because that's what the property value is going to be appraised at based upon his $1.5 million purchase. But he's going to build on it. But even if he doesn't meet that amount, you could take 80% of the numbers that I've got there in the Board of Regents sales tax column, and it just means it's less for him. I mean, the whole purpose of the Board of Regents is it incentivizes people to maximize their best use and economic value, because the more they generate, the more they receive. And in turn, the city receives more. But it hurts him from a reimbursement standpoint if he doesn't produce the amount that he's represented in his sales. But I told him that, and I said, when you give the numbers, be conservative. And I've talked to his accountant several times, and the accountant is the one that said, I think we're comfortable with these numbers. And I certainly think the numbers, they look within range from what he was telling me with MLK and his Lee Highway one. The Lee Highway is a bigger restaurant, so he was reasonable with regard to his projections based upon his other two stores here locally. He didn't take his sales figures from his other ones. He wanted to take this demographics here.
Mark, how many properties have we approved for IDB so far, starting with Bass Pro Shop?
If I'm going just by agreements, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, either 6 or 7 at this point.
And each one of those gave us a projected annual sales.
Since I've been here, I don't know if this gentleman did, but I think, they did, because they knew from Bass Pro what Bass Pro was going to be able to project. So, yeah, they did.
How close are those businesses coming to their projection overall?
Well,
I was going to say, Exit 1, Bass Pro, they have exceeded theirs.
Okay.
Max Smith Commons, which is Firehouse Subs, and the Dunkin' Donuts, they have exceeded theirs.
Okay.
Marco's Pizza has not met their qualifications yet. They have received nothing, because they have to have, more built to
3 out of 5.
3 out of 5.
Right.
They only are 2, so they have received nothing.
My understanding from the operations of the ones that we've done, of course, Jack's just opened, but in talking with Jack's, they're already exceeding their projected monthly sales, and they've only been open 4 months?
4 months.
4 months.
They're doing good.
And they are exceeding their monthly
Yes.
sales
They have to
already.
be open a
And
full
so,
fiscal year.
Jack's will meet their quota. They have to get 30,000, I think, Jack's before
Theirs
they
is 50.
their
I
baseline.
believe there's, I'd have to look at
Okay,
it.
well, they have a
Even though I
baseline.
looked at them all last week, I'd have to go back and look at them.
Okay. So they've got a baseline, but they're going to exceed theirs.
So based on our history of the others, we can halfway count on these numbers being.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. I mean, I can't predict a recession, but I think that's fair. And the reason one of the things I want to do is take the average rather than just plugging in. I mean, if you look at on the projected annual revenues, Seth said by 2042 he's going to have sales of $12 million, which would generate a Board of Regents tax of $8.2 million. Well, I did not plug in 8.2 million. I plugged in 7.8. So I took a lower percentage for me to get my ultimate number that I'm showing you all here. I didn't use his bottom number. I thought, rather than use his top number, let's take an average so that at least gives us some buffer zone there, or wiggle room, or margin of error. I asked him, I said, Seth, I want to make sure I'm clear, because you're basically going from 6 million in 2021 to 12 million in 2042. Do you think, that's a 50% increase, do you think you're going to meet that? And he said, absolutely. The cost is going to go up. I don't think, he's got a good price right now, but in 22 years, I suspect his menu may go up $1 or so in that. And particularly with the idea that he's going to make a bigger outdoor patio, He recognizes that in East Ridge, there's not really an outdoor restaurant with a patio that he's putting out there with televisions and a cover. And now that there's the ability for outside beer sales, he does anticipate, because East Ridge residents, there's a couple that have outdoor seating, but none is what he said that has the cover, that's going to have the a large amount of seating with televisions out there. And so he anticipates it's going to be a big draw for the community, because it really is the only one currently that offers that level of service on
What's
What's
its
the projected
right
opening date?
May.
We're shooting for April, May.
Okay.
Is that the reason that the revenues are 50% projected?
Correct.
2020.
Correct, yes.
Well, plus the visibility too, you're right there at the interstate, and that's.
The other reason he also says this is going up higher is he has not had a restaurant near a stadium that is projected to be what we're seeing with Chattanooga Red Wolves.
Is this the only one with the drive-through?
Well, it does have a drive-through, but they share a kitchen line. And
Okay.
so if you do a drive-through, what's the wait time right now?
20, between 15 and 25 minutes.
Okay.
To half an hour.
Could be.
Right.
It
You've
depends.
been out there.
Because it's all cooked fresh to order,
So
so.
10 minutes, if they can have a 10-minute turnaround, that'll be good. It'll bring people from,
The idea is to have a
We'll
drive
bring
there where you
people
can
from
actually
LA
go
Highway
there,
over here.
order at
They
the
can
drive-through
turn that
instead of
food
calling
around
it in
that
like you
time.
have to now.
Correct. He also wants to open for breakfast. He wants to have a chicken biscuit available for breakfast, and he doesn't open for breakfast at his other two restaurants. He, but he also recognizes, I mean, if you've got, depending on how many people are coming, you've got a Camp Jordan attraction that he's not built near. And then he's also going to have the Red Wolves organization there with at a minimum 14 home games. And that doesn't include other events that the Red Wolves owner wants to host at that stadium in addition to the soccer games, outdoor events. So he recognizes that the outdoor destination that East Ridge has to offer as it relates to the Camp Jordan and this new the Red Wolves is another reason he has projected these sales to go up to what he has.
You also have like a baseball or a group team sitting room too, don't you?
We will have party rooms and
So,
big
yeah.
long tables, and then the patio will be enclosed during the winter, so we won't lose any seating.
Oh, excellent.
Okay, anybody else have anything to ask before we go to a vote? Okay, I think the 70-30 to me sounds fair. And so I'm gonna put that to a vote then.
What are we approving, the resolution or the
Yes.
contract or?
Bill?
Well, I prepared the resolution,
Yes.
which would be adopting resolution 2019/10-01. By approving this resolution, you're approving the development agreement as it's been presented to you. There are two things I would like to notify you on a change of in the development agreement, which are essentially fairly minor. Yes. Okay. One was there was a typo that I changed in here. You don't need to worry about. But the other is Seth did ask me today. He called, and in section. It's in the assignment. So, section 5.04. He would like to modify section 5.04 simply to include that an approved successor be his heirs or his estate in the event that he would pass. And that's not uncommon to ask for. We did that about this time last year on the Exit 1 for purposes of the developer. So what it would say is you keep the sentence there on 5.04, but then you add, for the purposes of this agreement, developers' heirs and or estate shall be considered a permitted assignee or successor, is what it would say. And it just means if he passes, then the benefits of this border region continue to his heirs or his estate. And again, that's not uncommon to ask for, and probably should have been in there. And so he asked that that be included. And so so if you approve the resolution, and you're inclined to at a 30-70, then the motion would be I'd move to approve this resolution relative to the development agreement for a 30-70 split subject to the modification to include his heirs and estate as a permitted successor.
Okay. I need a motion to approve just what Mark said.
I'll make the motion to approve as amended, the 30-70 split.
Okay, second?
I second.
Go roll call.
Mr. Baker,
Yes.
Mr. City,
Yes.
Mr. Cox,
Yes.
Mr. Penley,
Yes.
Mr. Torrance,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Steele,
Abstain.
Chairman Rowland.
Yes. Okay. All right, the second item is discuss, take action, request to modify previous development agreement with Big Red Power Sports LLC, DBA Southern Honda Sports Power Sports, in regard to new developer address. I think they've moved.
I think, and I think Mr. Tuggle is here, and I've spoken with Mr. Tuggle various times in connection with this, and I can sort of fill in, and then he may have some stuff to add. The previous site that this, well, let me say, back in 2018, and I can't remember the time, but there was an agreement for a development agreement entered into with at that time Big Red Power Sports LLC, doing business with Southern Honda Power Sports, and I just Big Red will call them for this. That was for property that was going to be located over at. What was the address?
Ooh. That's a good question.
6,000.
Crossing
Go
Road.
ahead,
That
6,000.
sounds right.
We're overall by the church property is what I recall. And so, then, okay. And so at that time, they had an agreement for the, here it is, yeah. All right, so 6750 Ringo Road was where that agreement was. They did various soil testing and some other examinations relative to that property and made a determination that the cost to develop got much higher than what they had projected at the time that they came before this body for a request for the Board of Region agreement, and they ended up, there was no sale that occurred with that property. Subsequently, they have located property now that at 5330, which is that area of the, what's the coffee shop called, Local Coffee?
The old Ryan's building.
Well, you gotta be careful. The Ryan's is the property to the right of it, more to the, or on the west side of it. There's two properties that they own, but this agreement is only related to the Local Coffee property, whatever else operates out of it, because that is in the Board of Region. The
It's the old hardware store.
The old age haven.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Emerson Russell's property.
That's right.
correct. The Ryan Steakhouse is not in the Board of Region, and that was calculated to keep it out because the Board of Region baseline for the Ryans is somewhere, give or take, I don't know, 30,000 or something like that. Well, to have those baselines, that hurts the city as well. And so we purposely left out the Ryans, but we've got the Local Coffee in there because they can run all their sales out of that parcel and generate Board of Region dollars.
Is that building coming down? Was the plan?
No.
Remodel it or something to that effect?
That is separate from the Southern Honda project, but since we own that as well, its primary use will be parking for Southern Honda, and also will contain most likely a small coffee shop, and probably in conjunction with some existing coffee shops in that area, and perhaps also a small restaurant tap room, keeping in mind the use of what it has been. But that's a little bit separate from this project. Southern Honda will be roughly doubling the size of the existing building. That's the Abe Shaven Hardware. And that building will stay. It will be extensively remodeled. It'll be taken back to bare metal and redeveloped.
Second floor, no more offices in the back?
We're going to take down the second floor and leave the kind of awe effect when you walk in and see the elevated roof. There'll also be 2 additional buildings added to the back.
And there's 2 buildings in the back of that property now. Are those part of this, or?
Yes, the right building will retain as administration offices and a builder's area. There will be another small warehouse constructed in the back to hold crates of vehicles. And then the current kind of pole barn, we tried to figure out a way to save it, but it's not in the greatest condition. So it's going to come down and be rebuilt in a very similar building for a service.
So this isn't affecting the old Ryan's steakhouse at
Now,
all?
the Ryans will look very similar, but that's a separate discussion.
Oh,
So they purchased the property which is adjoining the existing coffee house now
that's where the coffee house is in the building we're talking.
right.
Correct.
So
We
they
do
purchased
currently.
that property,
They purchased that piece.
We
which
actually
includes
purchased
the
both.
coffee house.
Mhm.
Includes everything.
We currently own both, 5326 and 5330. We already do own them now.
Yeah.
What is both, the Ryan Steakhouse?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And Emerson's building.
But it's not included in this,
Correct.
Correct.
It'll mostly just be parking for this project.
so will that building come down?
No.
Do you already have plans for that building? Or?
Yes.
So it's actually a win for both of us that we kept the Ryans out of the Board of Region on purpose, because it doesn't attach a baseline to it. So it eliminates, that helps the city, and it helps the developer as well. So we've eliminated that issue there. But their operations are going to be, their sales are going to be on the property that they have, the current Board of Region property. And so when I'm talking to Mr. Tuggle, they have identified the 5330 Ringo Road as their new location, but the agreement, of course, related specifically to the project property being at 6750 Ringo Road. So one of the things that needs to be done is we need to amend their previous development agreement to reflect the new project property to be 5330 Ringo Road instead of the 6750 Ringo Road.
That's really a better location, I think, but you've got McBride and more traffic right there.
That's right. And we also wanted to bring more development to Midtown. Obviously we're business people, we're not, it's not entirely altruistic, but we wanted to kind of see more development continuing down there.
It
And there's
seems
good
like a better
access.
location for what you're selling.
It's a good plot. We also received a good history lesson about building on unknown fill. So we feel much better about the current situation. It's already been approved by Honda.
Be thankful you're not down on the Tennessee River.
That's right. It has been approved by Honda, and we already own the property. It's not a pipe dream. We just need to approve the address change and go through our permitting, et cetera.
Are you moving your entire location from Workman over here?
That's correct.
Will this building, when you get through with the addition and everything, will you have more space here than you have on Workman?
No, and part of that change is because we're actually increasing in one level of Honda franchise ownership, going from a level 4 to a level 5, which is the highest level. And in that agreement, they will warehouse the inventory for us with more of an on-time demand, so we'll be able to eliminate the majority of the warehousing we currently have. So our current building is 106,000 square feet, out of which at about 40,000 is a warehouse, and the new one will be about 62,000. So it'll still be a large building. I mean, it's a 4.8 acre plot. We're using half of it for building. It'll be a large building, but it will not be quite the 2.3 acre warehouse we currently have.
All right, so that was the first thing is we need to amend it as it relates to the property address. The other is, when I was doing the title search on the property, is instead of the property being purchased by Big Red Power Sports, the property was purchased by SHPS LLC. And so we need to approve an assignment. And I need to, Mr. Douglas, that is okay. So we'll have, instead of it being Big Red, you now have SHPS as being the developer under the development agreement. And so there has to be an approval of the assignment. And so in addition to the new property, we would vote under this resolution 2019-10-201 or 02. You're approving the assignment to the new owner who, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Tuggle, but isn't it Tim Kelly is the owner? Yep. So,
There's no real ownership change. It's just a way of making the banking simpler.
okay, so it's the same owners, or essentially the same owners. There's no difference. So we would need to vote to also assign the previous development agreement and approve the assignment over to SHPS, and that is part of the assignment and First Amendment.
So by approving the resolution, we're approving the assignment.
Correct, you are. The last thing is, previously they were going to buy a church parking lot, a church parcel which had a baseline of 0. And with this new property, we actually thought that there were some operations in 2012, so there would be a small or some baseline onto it. To the extent that there is a baseline, we don't think there is much of one, but whatever that operations was in 2012,
These Rich Motors was running there.
Is that right? Okay. Whatever that baseline is will apply. And so we provided that in here as well, that the language you would add, if you look at the assignment, document on page 2 provides under paragraph 3, therefore, we got to put in the provision in there under 3.03B that it's acknowledged that the base tax revenue as defined under the Act will be allocated relative to that property to the extent that there is any baseline on it. And so the developer knows that if there's a baseline of $20,000, then they have to generate before they're entitled to their reimbursement. That first $20,000 they have to generate first. And so, because this is a previously commercial operating business or property, that's why we didn't have it on the other one because it was a church lot. There was a zero baseline on it, and so we were adding that as well. So those are the 3 parts to assign and modify the previous development agreement. So by approving resolution 2019-10-02, you're accomplishing 3 things: the assignment, the modification to the property, as well as the incorporation of the base tax revenue provision to apply to the development agreement for the new property.
So all we need is a motion to approve this resolution.
Correct. Correct, yes.
Is the sales anticipated to be as much on this property as it was on the other property?
Yes, and there are some changes with Honda structuring that actually improve this outlook. It looks like we'll be the first dealership of Honda's new design. So we actually think there may be a slight improvement, but we project it will be at least the same as it was.
Okay, but our split's gonna stay the same?
Yeah, and they had a scaled or a tiered level of distribution over, I think it was a 6-year, 10-year, 15 and 20 something, I think is what they had.
That's gonna stay the same?
It'll stay the same. Now they've lost their first year because we'd hoped they'd be open at this time. I think they hoped they'd be open. So they've effectively lost that a year, but that hurts them, but it hurts us as well, but it's still the same. It'll continue.
Okay, I need a motion to approve resolution number 2019-10-02.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Mr. Baker?
Second.
Yes.
Somebody
He's second.
Okay, Mr. Baker said
Yes.
yes. Okay. Mr. City?
Yes.
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Penley?
Yes.
Mr. Torrey?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Steele?
Yes.
Chairman Brown?
Yes. Okay, the last thing is discuss and take action. Request between Smart Bank and Exit One LLC relative to assignment of right to receive payments for such development and allocation agreement relating to Water Region Retail Development District.
This is something that you all did last September. It's very similar. When you all, or when the IDB back in 2014 approved the development agreement with regard to Exit One, as one of the provisions in there, the IDB agreed that while they can't assign, they have the right to pledge or otherwise collateralize their entitlement to the Water Region funds. And as the developers for Exit One go and secure funding for future development of their property, as part of that, the bank requires them to be properly secured. They got to collateralize their entitlement. And all they're saying is the bank knows that this IDB board has already agreed to that. What they say is that's fine, we recognize that, but we want it to be loan specific. And so in talking with the attorney for Smart Bank, relative to this loan, there is a loan being taken out, I believe, on the property that currently is housing the Starbucks. And this loan is for just under $1.7 million. And as part of securing that loan, they have to assign the rights to receive those. In other words, if something happened to the developers and the Board of Regents were coming in, the bank could step in its place and is entitled to receive those Board of Regents funds. The IDB has already agreed to that in their development agreement. So what you're doing here is you're kind of reaffirming what you already agreed to in 2014. And then the estoppel certificate is simply saying that the city is acknowledging that all funds that relative to the Starbucks has been paid or will be paid upon receipt from the city, and that the city acknowledges that this is an assignment and that they'll pay that when those funds come in. And that's all this resolution is. Again, it's identical to what you all did last September. This is just loan number 2.
Okay. Any questions? If not, need a motion to approve resolution number 2019/10-0.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Baker,
Yes.
Mr. City,
Yes.
Mr. Cox,
Yes.
Mr. Henley,
Yes.
Mr. Torrance,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Steele, Chairman Williams.
Yes. Okay, that's all that's on the agenda. Does anyone have anything else they need to bring before the agenda, before the meeting?
You mentioned Starbucks. Do we have an agreement with Starbucks? Do they get?
They're receiving Board of Regents, but that's in the Bass Pro Development.
Oh.
So that was all done in 2014. That's right, yeah. They will, they'll be generating Board of Regents.
And that, and then barbecue,
Same with that, yeah, same with that, yeah.
that was a plus.
If there's nothing else, meeting is adjourned.